Welcome to How to Harness the Power of Magic 1. I'm really happy that you're here. I am Sage Lee, your headmaster for the School for Wizards, and we are going to show you some slides now. So I just wanted to say hi, make sure that you saw me, who I am, and we'll move over to those slides now. We've had a few little snafus getting things going, but that's okay because sometimes technology will do that. So here we go. We're going to share this document, and now you should be able to see the thing that says hold tight, we're about to begin, but we've already begun. So here is what I want to share with you right up front by Arthur C. Clarke. Magic is just technology we don't understand yet. Now, he also said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But this says the same thing in a lot plainer language. Now, what this means is that magic really is technology, and technology is magic. So welcome to The Power of Magic, Harnessing the Power of Magic, Part 1. The image that you see here is actually the seal to King Tut's tomb. And if there was any ancient culture that understood about magic, it was the ancient Egyptian culture. Boy, did they ever understand about the power of magic. So I want to acknowledge you, first of all, for being here. And by being here, you have an inkling that you already are a wizard. Now, I believe that you are a wizard and always have been a wizard. And the thing is, they've just forgotten to teach you some things when you were young, or there were things that you realized when you were young that they talked you out of, slapped you out of, convinced you weren't true, but they were. Now, I want to talk a little bit about myself just because I want to let you know who I am. The first thing I want to talk about is something called the zone of necessity. Now, the zone of necessity is the way that the universe has of delivering me what I desire. So if something goes into the zone of necessity, in other words, if I believe that I actually truly do have to have it, then the universe just creates a series of strange events in order to get me what I want. I had said this back when I was 29 years old. I said, I want to be a homeowner by the time I'm 30. And it was during a time when homes really did seem out of reach for anyone my age, especially, you know, as I was still young and trying to get my career off the ground. And it just so happened that I was able to purchase my first home just a couple of months before my 30th birthday. And I did so on disability, which is the magical part. Like, how in the world did I do that? And I'll tell you that story later, or if you decide that you want to come to the Power of Magic or one of my live events, I'll tell you in much greater detail there. But that's what I mean by the zone of necessity. And I want to say further that this is the point in the webinar where I'm supposed to say, my life is great. And my life actually is pretty darn great because I get to manifest whatever I want to, like a wizard, you know, sort of like a wizard should be the new like a boss. And when I manifest like a wizard, I'm supposed to say, well, it wasn't always this way, but in fact, it was always this way because I grew up in a house that was kind of in the middle of the woods, in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. Like, my parents had moved into this house and they had failed to cut down all the giant trees. And we're talking about like huge oak trees and huge sweet gum trees and huge other hardwood trees that were quite beautiful. But when you have gigantic forest trees that are hundreds of years old like that, you do not have lawn. So everyone else in the neighborhood had cut down their giant trees and planted grass. And, you know, they were these sort of big third of an acre lots that they rode around and, you know, on these riding lawnmowers and fixed. But in our house, we didn't do that, right? My parents didn't do that. They failed to cut down the giant trees. So it was like forest with the little forest duff on the floor like that. And that's how I grew up. And I want to tell you a little story of something that happened actually after I left there, but you know, it was kind of indicative of what went on in that world as well. I had prepared a candle with some prayers, which is something that wizards like me do. And these prayers were really powerful, and I'd carved the little symbols, the alchemical symbols for the sun and other symbols into this candle. And I was burning it to make those prayers happen, right? And it was prayers of being a light for the world and super powerful, you know, to engage my wizardy powers. And I'd lit the candle and really not thought anything of it. It was down in my basement room, and I was nearby doing a little bit of work on the house, and I heard this sound, and it was like, and I said to my friend and partner who I was working with at the time, I said, well, what's that sound? And he said, well, it's your computer. And I said, well, no, my computer is not even on. It's something else. And I looked over at the candle, which was just in the last throes of burning out, right? It was still flaming. And there was a mourning dove sitting next to the candle. It had flown in from the outside and perched right there next to the candle. Now, I don't know about you, but I actually happen to know that birds are not drawn to fire in general. But somehow, this bird was drawn to this specific fire, probably because it had a prayer in it, although I don't know why. And to this day, I do not know why I did this. But I looked over at the dove and I raised my hand up in the air like the sort of royal, like welcome to my world sort of gesture. And the bird flew from where it was perched next to the candle and landed on the top of my head. Now, I can't make stuff like this up. It's too weird to make up. And I walked out of the house, and the bird, as soon as we got outside, the bird just took off and flew away. Now, this is the kind of magical stuff that happens to me all the time. But let's go back to the place where I grew up. Now, this is not a picture of my childhood home. It was a lot more plain than this and a little bit bigger, but not a whole lot bigger. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with a washing machine in the kitchen, and most of what was beautiful in that house was the yard, was the forest, literally. And if you look at the left-hand side of this picture, it really is what it looked like in that yard, right? It was dappled light because no sunlight could get through those gigantic trees. Now, here's the thing. Over the years, the land that my parents' house was on was a low point, and it had these super tall trees that were taller than any of the other trees around. And if you live in a sort of moist environment, and it was Georgia, so it rained all the time, and you're in the low point, it means that your ground is damp all the time. And so you can see from this picture and probably imagine what happened. Lightning struck those trees. not all at once, but one at a time over years. And so lightning probably struck that property 7 or 8 times over the years. And we're talking about over decades, but one at a time, those trees were struck by lightning and had to be cut down. Now, when I was living with my parents, I was a very proper little church-going kid. And I was in the Protestant church, the Baptist church, which means that you don't get baptized when you first show up in the church. You have to accept Jesus, and you have to do that. You have to do that in order to be a member of the church. And our church was not this church, but it looked very similar, very plain windows, nothing super fancy on the inside. And people were just kind of ordinary individuals. And I remember, that they would do this thing on Sunday where the whole choir would be singing the doxology, which is this, praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. That kind of thing. And it was very moving. And I remember I was like moved. The spirit of the divine came into me. And I let my hands off of the rail or the pew in front of me to go down and do this thing, although I had no idea how to do it. And I heard a voice, like I literally heard a voice in my head. And mind you, I was like 9 years old. And this voice said, not here. I exist, but these are not your people. And what do you do when God speaks to you in a voice like this? Well, I don't know about you, but what I did was just say, okay, I get it. I held my ground. And as it turned out, God was right. So I moved from this hobbity house right here to this house, right? I ran away when I was 15 years old to Atlanta. And this was another sort of wizardy thing to do because I was like, okay, I don't want to live in this world anymore. As many teenagers, I was a little bit ashamed of my whole like super different family. They were really different. They lived in a sort of hobbity house, and things were unusual at my house. Like my parents didn't really recognize that they were this sort of stranger folks on our street, but they were, and so we were too. And I ran away to Atlanta, Georgia, which at that time was the 16th largest city in the world. And Atlanta has really changed now. It's a different city, but it doesn't matter because it was still a very urban environment. And within a few days of being in Atlanta, I was working day labor, didn't have a permanent job. I was working day labor and had a place to live. And within 3 weeks, I had a permanent job as a custom painter in a statuary company at 15 years old. And I was very proud of myself. And when I came back to high school, which I decided to do, you have these moments where you have to make a decision, right? I had gone into this intense learning environment where I actually had to use my wizard skills every day. Like I used my street skills, I used my persuasive skills, I used, and I really didn't have words for these skills at that time. I had to learn those later as I got even more wizard education later. But at this point was when I really began to realize that I didn't have special powers, but that I had the power to manipulate my environment to the way that I wanted it to be, and that I knew other people could do that too. So when I came back, I was sort of professionally weird, because one day I would dress in all black like the guy on the left, and then the next day I would dress in all white, and this is Brad Pitt, so he's a little bit more ordinary looking than I was. But I'd wear, like, what's not on the Brad Pitt photograph here is I used to wear these amulets around my neck and stuff like that. So it was a little bit unusual, but people got it. They got that I was different and that I was unafraid to be different. So everything in my life has been geared toward that since then, is the knowledge that we're all different and that we all deserve to be able to express the difference that we are. So now I have two intentions for the rest of our time together today. So intention one is to give you everything that I've got for an hour, and it probably, to tell you the truth, is going to go to about an hour and a half, because I've got a lot of material. I have many things to show you. It's really, I'm trying not to blow your minds or blow your brains out, but I've got a lot of stuff, and I want to give that to you for the hour or hour and some change that we have. And the second thing is, at the end, I'm going to let you know how to work with me further. And specifically today, I'm going to give you like a super special incentive to come to the Power of Magic live event. And I'm going to be telling you some things, in the next hour or so, because I'm super excited about it. I want to have you there if it's the right thing for you to do. And if not, then that's fine too. I'm not attached. So I am a wizard. You probably have figured that out by now, but what you might not have figured out by now is that you are a wizard too. I am a wizard, you are a wizard, and you can actually affirm that, and I'd like you to do that with me right now, even though I might not be able to hear your voice. I would like you to say, and even if you're listening to the recording, I don't care, just say right now, I am a wizard. And don't just imagine that you're saying it, just say it in your out loud voice. I'm a wizard. Now, for those of you who are women and you think, oh, I can't be a wizard because wizards are men. Wise ard, which is the root word of wizard, means wise one. Wise one. So anyone can be a wizard because anyone can be a wise one. So I want you to imagine right now that you have been creating wizardy magic for a year, right? And that's the situation that the people who are just about to graduate from the School for Wizards year one for this year, they have been creating wizard magic for a year. And I know what they're doing, but imagine what you would be doing if you were actually in this place of creation for a whole year. What are you having? What are you doing? What's true in your life? What do you have? Right? And this is about more than just having physical things, because you can have a house or a car, which are the things that I get very easily from the universe whenever I want them, really, really want them. But what about peace of mind and happiness in your family, and the end of estrangement, the ability to make wise decisions about everything? Just think about what are you having? And now contrast that today. Like, how much of your wizard self are you actually engaging in this moment? What are you doing right now? What are you having right now? Now, I know for a lot of you, the election was not as you expected. And for some of you, that means the election was not as you expected in a positive way, and some of it in a negative way. We're going to talk about that later today, but I want you to just imagine yourself, what you're doing with your wizard self today. How are you dealing with it? So can I now share, I actually have 4 secrets, and we may skip the last one if we really run out of time. But I'm going to share 3 or 4 with you today, and then 3 or 4 with you next week with the How to Harness the Power of Magic 2, which I'm teaching next week on Tuesday, not Wednesday, because I did not do Wednesday. I did not do Tuesday, which is our usual webinar day, because of the US election. And I actually was going to do it, but then I heard that Broadway was shutting down. And I'm like, okay, if Broadway's shutting down, I think I'd better just move my thing to Wednesday. And I think that was a smart decision. So here's my first number one tip. I want you to write this down because it is deep, and I'm going to share some of the depth of it with you and then how we use it in the Power of Magic. So use the universe as a consultant. Use the universe as a consultant. So some things have to be true in order for you to use the universe as a consultant. And the first one is a concept that is popular in shamanism, but actually it's popular among many indigenous cultures and ancient cultures, is the belief shared by ancient cultures, and I'll just, I left it blank deliberately, I'm gonna fill you in, right? That inanimate objects and the world itself have souls or intelligence or sentience. Now, the modern scientific world looks at animism with a sort of smirkiness. And it says, oh yeah, that's what people used to think when they didn't know any better. Sigh. So this is a quote that you might not be able to read on your screen. It's tiny. I'm going to read it for you, but I just want to let you know that this is not a quote that was created by some fruity person, right? This is created by Ken Wilber, who is one of the preeminent philosophers of our time. And this is in a book of his called Integral Psychology. And he's talking about the bleakness of the scientific proclamation. He says, in that extraordinary journey from matter to body to mind to soul to spirit, scientific materialism halted the journey at the very first stage and proclaimed that all subsequent developments to be nothing but arrangements of frisky dirt. Why this dirt would get right up and eventually start writing poetry was not explained. And he goes on in this quote to say, as if two dumbs make a Shakespeare, right? There is something, even to the preeminent thinker of our age, there is something underneath the world that is beyond our ken, right? So something that's beyond our ken can have knowledge for us. So I want you to imagine, first of all, that the universe is alive. And I want you to imagine that all of it is alive, not just deer or your dog or a ground squirrel or a whale or a dolphin, who have really big brain cases and stuff. I want you to imagine that everything is alive, and that it cannot but be so, because if we are alive, then we sprang from a system, right? Even evolution fits into this idea, right? Because we're just the apex of awareness, right? Things that are less aware than us are just simply things that are vibrating at a different level than us. If you really look at matter, it is just slowed down energy. right? We don't want to get too deep into particle physics, and actually these days particle physics and metaphysics look quite a bit like each other. But all that's required at this point in time is for you to just imagine that the universe is alive and talk to it, right? Talk to it. So that means, and you have to learn how to talk to it. You have to learn the languages, right? But that's not all. You have to talk to it, and then you have to believe that perhaps the universe and these expressions of the universe, such as dog, cat, ground squirrel, cougar, bobcat, snake, apple tree, pear tree, prickly weed, artichoke, rocket lettuce, that all these things may be smarter than you. Now, we are trained to think that the cerebral cortex, the part of our brain that thinks about thinking about itself, among other things, is the measurement of intelligence. But we actually know this isn't true because of the fact that there are African gray parrots that can learn concepts such as sharing, which human babies or human children do not learn until they're about 4 years old. It's a very complex concept, sharing. And African gray parrots are not the only ones that actually understand that. And African gray parrots have a cerebral cortex, that could, the entire tissue of the cerebral cortex could fit inside of a pea. Their whole brain is the size of a walnut or smaller. So I hope you're starting to get it, right? Ancient and indigenous cultures actually understood this. And they realized that humans have a seat at the table and that our responsibility is to these other things because we have this thing called imagination, which I'll go into later in the webinar. But you have to understand the language of birds, right? You have to speak to birds a specific way. You have to speak to stones a specific way. You have to speak to trees a specific way. And if you do that, then you can begin to understand the knowledge and information that those things have for us. Now, there's a lot of complexity here that I am not going to go into, but it's just this simple thing. Imagine that the universe is alive, all of it. Talk to it. Imagine that it's smarter than you and receive the information. You can actually go out and try this on your own. I really super suggest it. We do this. I want to just tell you about this exercise that we do in the Power of Magic. I teach people a little bit about how to read the signs. And then we actually go out into nature to where trees and rocks and stones and sometimes water and sometimes clouds live. And we ask in a special and reverential way for their wisdom. And they give it. And people come back, there's a time to write after this, and people come back with pages and pages of powerful advice from these creatures, from these beings that they couldn't have made up themselves. It's really, really, really incredible. So, second tip that I'm going to share with you is to make friends with the invisible world. Now, this sounds like it's a lot like the first one, but there's a very different attitude here because one is the world is not invisible, right? For number one, it's like use the universe as your consultant. None of that stuff is invisible. A stone, a rock, a tree, a cougar, those are all very visible. But there is an invisible world as well. Now, how do you make friends with an invisible world. Like if you can't see it or hear it or touch it or locate it with any of your external senses, then how do you get to it? Well, you get to it through what are called correspondences, right? Correspondences are there is something in the living, breathing, visible world that corresponds to something in the invisible world. Like things here stand for things in the invisible world. And let me just be really clear right now, is that the invisible world is not like some interdimensional thing where you've slipped through some wormhole and suddenly find yourself in a whole new world that looks kind of like Disney's Magic Kingdom with castles and sparkly things everywhere. No, the invisible world is actually right here in front of you. It's right here in front of you. And so our correspondences are our maps to it. So there's a thing that I like to say, which is as above, so below. And it's not something that I invented, but it comes from a tablet that is thousands of years old. It was found and revered for centuries, and it disappeared, I believe, in the 30s, and it was called the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. And on it, it doesn't say as above, so below, and it says it, I think, in Greek and Latin and a couple of other languages. So it doesn't say it in English, but the various translations are more or less that which is above is similar to that which is below in order to accomplish the great work. Right? In order to accomplish the great work. So this is very similar to the scientific concept of fractals, which says that in the fractal world, that which is at a larger scale is self-similar to that which is at a smaller scale. So you can go, for instance, along a coastline and you can zoom way back and it looks very similar, and you can zoom in and it looks equally similar. And what I've shown here is a picture of a cliffside. And I don't know if you can tell very much about this because I don't know what the resolution of the Google Hangout is, but guess what? What's the scale of that? Is that like a mile-long cliff? Is it a super close-up? Is it somewhere in between? Right? So it's very hard to tell because this is fractal and it's illustrating as above, so below. Other correspondences are had with one of the most powerful documents of the last, I don't know, 20 centuries, and that is the deck of the Tarot. Now, I have engaged in a 7-year project to create my own tarot deck, which I will show you a picture of in the next couple of slides. But for right now, I want you to see that here's a little chart. This is a correspondences chart. So we have 4 suits or suites of the tarot: wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. And those correspond to elements and Hebrew letters and archangels and colors and directions and functions and seasons, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I just wanted you to see that there is a clear association or correspondence with these things in the visible world with things that might actually be in the invisible world. And these correspondences help us when we draw a tarot card. The symbols in it help us to understand who we are, the answer to the question that we're asking, and they do so by providing this, for lack of a better word, education. So here's the Sage Tarot deck. The back side of the card is the super colorful piece, and that's what the pack looks like. By the way, if you do come to the Power of Magic, you get your own Sage Tarot deck. Yowza. Okay, time for tip number 3. And this is to arrive where you belong. Arrive where you belong. Now, how could it be that you are not where you belong? What is the problem state, right? I mean, I don't like to talk about problem states all that much, but why don't you belong where you are? Well, some of us do and some of us don't, and I'll explain it to you this way. There are stages of life, and on the left, there are the 8 stages of life that are, and now I've forgotten Bill's last name, who I should really know because he's written some very fundamental texts on, and I'll give it away here, the concept of initiation. So in the ancient world, and this is one of the pieces of magic that has been denied us, and it's why we are so often immature as adults, as men, as women, because we don't actually exit these stages. So there's early childhood for Bill, and in the next slide or so, I'll tell you what his last name is because it's printed on one of the slides. Early childhood, like when you're a baby, right? Middle childhood. And in middle childhood, there's this really wonderful initiatory experience, which is a powerful and profound relationship with nature. Now, I would say, raise your hand or put in the chat window now whether you had this or not, and the people that have it know it. They oh yeah, I used to play in the woods all the time. When I was 6, 7, 8, 9, we'd build forts. We'd go hang out in the woods. And it was easy for me to do this because I already lived in the forest anyway, right? Just walk out in my yard and I'm in the forest. But it just so happened that there was another 5 acres of tertiary forest, which is the biological term for forest that's, in the South, where the pine trees have grown up and they only last for about 100 years and they fall down. And then in the canopy that's been growing up underneath the pine trees, the hardwood trees all grow up and then they take over. And so this was hardwood forest. And then in the canopy of the hardwood trees were rhododendrons, there were magnolia trees. It was totally beautiful. There's a running stream right behind my house. It was absolutely amazing. So I had this powerful and abiding relationship with nature, which is really necessary. And if we don't get it then, we have to go back and pick it up as adults because we need to initiate into these different stages, So for him, it's like early middle childhood, early late adolescence, early late adulthood, and early late elderhood. Now this sort of corresponds, speaking of correspondences from the previous point, this sort of corresponds to the Wiccan, or as they call it, family tradition, 5 stages of life, right? So childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, which is like, for men, it is the warrior, and for women, it's the maiden, right? You're out of adolescence, but you are not yet raising a family, right? And then adulthood is the time in which typically, and some of us have families and some of us have, pets or art or some other way that we, enter into that adulthood stage. And then the last stage is the crone or sage stage for men and women respectively, which I've just commandeered into Wise Ard, or wizard stage, right? When you are entering that piece. And it doesn't matter which of these that you use, although every person who does initiation will have their own method. What matters is that you exit one stage before entering the next, and this is how we end up with 80-year-old people who are acting like high school teenagers. And I'm not just talking about like being kind of forever young, full of vivacious life and energy. And as you'll see, there's a woman named Iris Apfel who is the 96-year-old representative for a cosmetics company. We're not talking about people like her. We're talking about people who are emotionally immature at 86 or 96 because they never exited childhood through any kind of initiation. And sometimes kids, like the adolescent phase, is a dark phase. There's darkness in that adolescent phase that must be experienced. And it is a disservice to our teenagers to expect them to go into adulthood without a way to safely engage with the darkness of late adolescence. So let's actually look at this. This is from Bill Plotkin. Thank you, Bill, for putting your name on the sheet, right? He shows that on the East is birth. We go into a naming ceremony. I've done naming ceremonies for children. We do puberty rituals. Those have been popular among some of my friends these days, where they will appreciate, much more popular for women or girls than it is for boys, because it's very clear when a girl is mature enough to be of childbearing age, and that's the beginning of puberty, right? And at the end of late adolescence, you have a soul initiation. This is usually when the vision quest happens. And then you have the apprentice phase, the artisan phase, the master phase, and the sage phase, which is the late elderhood, right? And these are around a wheel. Now, why is it so important to do this? Like, why is it necessary to do this? And what is the benefit of it? Well, I believe it is super necessary for us to actually become mature as a culture and as a society, right? We knew how to do this once when we were indigenous, wherever we were indigenous to, whether it was Europe or Africa or South America or North America. There is a way that we knew how to do this, but we've forgotten it. See, this is the thing about being a wizard. I'm just teaching you information and wisdom that you knew once, but forgot. So the textbook definition of initiation is a celebration of the passage which occurs when an individual leaves one group to enter another. And it involves a significant change of status in society. Now, this is one of the things that we don't very much have, like no one is going to look at your children and go, oh, your child is uninitiated, right? But they know, in indigenous cultures, they know where they are. And there are many things that because of the way that our culture is structured, it is very hard to do. But initiation is not one of those things. This could actually become true for all of us. Now, these folks are getting ready for an initiation, I believe, in Myanmar or India. These are monks. And one of the characteristics of an initiation is that you give up your identity. You enter into this liminal world. You stop being yourself. You have no identity that is separate. And then you go through your initiation and you get back to it. Now, what are the kinds of initiation here? Well, we've got in childhood, and these are ones that exist now, right? The first steps, their child took its first steps. the first word. How many of you remember what your first word was? Now, this is apocryphal because like I was not aware enough to remember myself what my first word was, but my parents swear that my first word was peaches, which is not an easy word to say for a 1 and whatever year old. My second word was pencil, oddly enough. Completion of toilet training is another kind of initiation, right? And a lot of parents put a lot of pride in, oh, well, my child was toilet trained at this age or this age or this age. But it is a kind of coming of age. Now you can use the toilet instead of wearing diapers. Breeching, which is something that happens not so much in America, but in England, it was the child was dressed in dresses or short pants until a certain age, and then at a certain age, they were allowed to wear long pants, and believe you me, never went back to wearing shorts again. So compare this to a culture that doesn't do something like breeching, where you have adults who are 40, 50, and 60 years old that are still running around in shorts. Now, it doesn't actually matter in some ways, but in other ways, it's like a symbol of maturity is not there. I don't want to disparage anyone for wearing shorts if you wear shorts, because certainly in certain parts of the country, it's much more comfortable to wear shorts. But if you wear them every single day and don't wear long pants, then maybe there's some initiation that didn't happen. There's ear piercing, there's kindergarten graduation, there's first day of school. You have the trauma of kindergarten graduation, and then you got your trauma of the first day of school. Learning to read and write, riding a bicycle, right? I don't know if I remember the exact moment when I was able to ride the bike on my own, but I sure do remember the exhilaration that I felt. I don't remember any of the other details, but I remember, oh, I'm doing it, and it was like flying. It was the most amazing feeling ever. There's a picture of kindergarten graduation. The kids are very happy and looking very mature. Adolescence and young adulthood. You've got other things like the first crush, the first date, the first kiss, losing one's virginity, first menstruation, learning to drive, earning a driver's license, Sweet 16, prom, or debutante ball. I moved to California in my 20s, and I certainly was not in the social class to be invited to a debutante ball, but everyone knew that the debutante ball happened every year, and that what happened is that the young woman was presented to society at the debutante ball. And other darker forms of initiation in adolescence and young adulthood are hazing. There's graduation, which is certainly not dark, but usually celebratory. There's moving out of the parents' home, and then, of course, a wedding. So here's an example of graduation. And here's another example of the debutante ball. And some of these young women look very happy, and some of them look to be not so happy at being dressed identically in white. So there are also non-age related kinds of initiation. And I want you to just think about these in terms of how many you've done, and not whether you were, because I know you were, how you were different before and after, right? So in religious initiations we have that are still performed today, we have the bar and bat mitzvah. We have in the Catholic Church and in the Episcopal Church, we have confirmation. In the Australian Aboriginal Society, we have walkabout. In the Mennonite culture, we have Rumspringa. We have the Vision Quest, which I run a Vision Quest every spring. We have a secular coming of age ceremonies, that are celebrated in our culture. So this is not actual Rumspringa, but it's just a a picture that was called Rumspringa because it's indicative of the kind of craziness that kids on Rumspringa can get up to, and then they come back to the society, or they leave it for good after Rumspringa. And then here is an old painting of a young man undergoing the confirmation process in the Catholic Church. And it looks like actually that the person is receiving confirmation in the middle of the frame, and then on the lower left of the frame, there is actually a baptism going on as well. So you got a 2-for-1 there. You've got other initiations that are performed today: white coat ceremony in medicine and pharmacy. You have the black belt grading in martial arts, scarification, and other physical endurances such as tattooing and piercing, retiring, castration in some sects and species and castes, and of course, forms of initiation that are extremely dark and controversial, such as circumcision, subincision, and genital mutilation for young women. And I am not recommending anything that mutilates the human body as something, as some form, especially something that subjugates either men or women. But there is definitely an initiatory quality to that. So here's the modern initiation of Navy graduation, in which they all toss their hats up, and Lord knows how anyone finds their actual hat. Of course, they all have name tags on the inside, so you just distribute the hat back to the person that it came from. Here's the woman, forgotten her name now, but she is the most pierced person. She's won the Guinness Book of World Records for the most pierced person, and she's actually undergone initiation to the point where she is unrecognizable. Right? This is the power that initiation has, and while I'm not suggesting that everyone look like this or even have a single piercing, I'm saying that this is the metaphoric quality of how different you potentially can be before and after this. So what are the markers that we have for these stages of life? And we already talked about this, so I'm not going to go over it in any further detail. But I wanted to show you some people who I spoke of earlier. This is Iris Apfel. She is the 96-year-old spokesperson for MAC Makeup. Widely known to be an amazing individual. And when I'm 96, I want to be like her. She is not shying away from life. She is not retired in any sense of the word. And those glasses are very characteristic of her. And you can actually, for those who know her, you can just show them a picture of those glasses and they'll like, oh, Iris Apfel. But how amazing to be 96 years old and be the representative of a cosmetics company. It's amazing. So let's show you some others. Here is somebody who's sort of the opposite, right? And I don't want to pick on June Shannon, who apparently has lost a lot of weight in the past couple of years. But in some ways, June Shannon does not act as if she has been initiated. She's not acting oftentimes like an adult. While on the other hand, her daughter, Honey Boo Boo, who is dressed up in adult-looking makeup with a kind of adult hair, and I'm pointing this out not to disparage either Honey Boo Boo or her mother, but to show that in our culture, there's a lot of confusion about this, right? And in traditional cultures, you would probably not have this kind of age confusion, because people would just initiate into the next phase of their life and initiate into the next phase of their life. And you might say, well, isn't that oppressive to, have to be that way? I mean, shouldn't we be able to be free to be ourselves? Well, I think that the case in point here is that you can always go back to behaving any way that you behaved previous to your initiation. But if you never initiate, you never actually get the container for the you never get the container for the more mature behavior, right? Because there is a cycle to life, and if we and you also don't get the eternal focus on youth. You know, in modern Western culture, our focus is on youth, and women are especially and acutely aware of this. And it's one of the reasons why so many stars will get plastic surgery and fail to, graduate, because they want to continue to play the same kind of roles that they played before. And you notice I said the word graduate, right? Like, so initiate, graduate. It's like they don't want to graduate into playing the next level, and this is not so marked in England, for instance, because I've seen a huge number of English actors in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s who are quite amazing and are very happy to play their age. So we have literally in our culture been cast adrift. And this drawing here is the drawing of a strange attractor, which is a chaos shape. The flipping back and forth between these two attractors is something that there's a mathematical formula for this. I'm not going to go into chaos theory here, but I just am using it to illustrate my point. There is a chaotic oscillation that's happening here, as is happening in our lives. And what we need is a way to actually center ourselves, right? We need to center ourselves from this drifting that we're doing. We need mooring. We need to actually throw our rope out to the harbor and tie the boat up to it. Realize the boat can go back out again, but we need to be moored because we are cast adrift and are not sure, very many of us, where we are. Now, I want to do one final thing, and we've been talking for about an hour. I want to actually skip over this because I want to let you know a little bit about the School for Wizards and the Power of Magic that's coming up. So I'm gonna skip directly to the takeaway, and I will do this other part. I'll go back to it if you want to hang around afterwards. But I want to make sure that for the people who have to leave, to let you know what's happening in the School for Wizards. And actually this is happening next week on the 18th, 19th, and 20th. But let me not get ahead of myself. So our takeaways from the webinar today are: see everything as having wisdom for you, which is the same thing essentially as saying use the universe as your consultant. Make friends with the invisible world. Arrive where you belong. Initiate. Just do it, whether or not you understand how to do it, like get some friends to, just mark a ritual beginning and end to things, and you will be much happier. And then I'm going to say this point, but we're going to go back to it a little bit later. Use your imagination, because it's what sets us apart from every other living creature on this planet. It's how we're godlike, actually. So your invitation here is to attend the Power of Magic 2016. Now, we're going to just talk about the different points that we made on the thing, on the webinar today, and we are going to talk about how you are going to get a little bit more of that in the Power of Magic. So, using the universe as a consultant. What we do in the Power of Magic is to learn specifically how to inquire in the world to get the answers that are best for you. And what happens in life and in business especially is that sometimes you end up in a place where you do not know the answer, and no amount of thinking can give you the answer. So you learn how to inquire of the natural world to get answers from the natural world. Right? And I want to take you through this case, which is my friend and client Barbara, who she was living an adequate life. She had a partner of some number of years, and there wasn't a whole lot of magic or spark there. And she lived in a place that was, you know, not terrible, but not really super great. You know, everything was just, it was okay. She had an okay life. Wasn't anything to complain about. But then she attended the Power of Magic event, and within, I believe it was within 3 weeks, she had met her soulmate on the beach in Hawaii, and then moved in with him to their dream home, which they, you know, she's like, I don't know why I'm moving into this. I don't know if I can afford it. It turned out that they absolutely could. It was a 3-story home on the beach in Sausalito. And now she's actually moved down to another part of Central California where she's always dreamed of living, and she got married this last September, just a month or so ago, and she's literally living her dream life. She's living the life that she conceived as the perfect life to live. Now, I would be wary about sharing this with you unless she was the one that continuously tells me that she attributes all of that to this workshop that she attended. That's the power of it. So again, we're going to go back to the points that we made, making friends with the invisible world. Correspondences, right? You're going to receive actually your own copy of the Sage Tarot deck if you come to the Power of Magic. You'll actually learn about the reality of synchronicity, like it's real. And you'll learn how to use synchronicity and correspondences in order for you to gain wisdom and answer questions. Like dealing with the invisible world and dealing with magic is getting answers to questions that you can't get answers to any other way, right? And a lot of other things as well, but that's part of what we're here for. So let's take this case. Johanna, she was in major debt, and she set an intention in the event she attended to be out of debt within a year, and she posted on our wizard group within 6 months that she was already completely out of debt. And I'll just take an opportunity to say this too, even though there's not a slide for it. I had another gentleman in a course that was not the Power of Magic, but I do 4 courses per year, and this was a manifestation course. And I have people state 4 things that they want to manifest, and they go from being really easy to being impossible. And he comes back into the manifestation workshop on the 2nd day, and he says, well, you know, I have to come up with a new impossible thing because I just did the impossible thing this morning. So that's the power of intention and the power of like having us come together like this. So arrive where you belong, the whole initiation thing, right? The entire event is a form of initiation that lets you be able to show up in the present. Many people define their lives as before and after the Power of Magic event. And on Sunday, we actually all create together a ritual in which we initiate the people who are graduating after studying in the School for Wizards for a year. And we have several graduates who will be there this year, and you will help to initiate them. So just one more case. Tina, she initiated last year, and her intentions were to publish her book, and she's been working with me for a number of years. She now, since that time, now has a literary agent, and all she wanted to do is just publish her book. So she got even more than that. She got a book, not only a book, but a book series and a literary agent, right? She's got books that are expected from her in the wings based on this really powerful world and set of characters that she created. And she said, after we did her initiation last year, she said that nothing this powerful has happened to her since her wedding. So that's how powerful this event was. So you got a money back guarantee. Like, look, I'm not going to mess around. If you don't like it, if it's just totally not what you expect it to be, and I've explained what we're going to be doing, I'm not going to give you all the secrets because there's lots of stuff that you will learn, but you get your money back if you don't want it. And if you think, if you know that it's not right for you, you'll know after a day. So at the end of the first day, just ask me for your money back, and no questions asked. I'll just give it back. That's how much I believe in this program. So your investment for this program is $997, and it includes all meals from lunch on Friday to lunch on Sunday. And we leave usually around 3:30 or 4 on Sunday afternoon. We start at 9 o'clock on Friday on the 18th. And we put together one of those meals ourselves as part of an exercise. The rest of the meals are cooked for you by a catered chef. And and I didn't write this on the slide, and I may not offer it later, but until the spaces that we have allotted for this are up. So it's just $1,000 for potentially changing your life over 3 days. That's pretty incredible. For you, I will, and because, I do this because I want to participate in the spiritual evolution of all beings, which includes you. I'm offering a $700 discount off that. So for a limited time, you can, and please do this within 48 hours so that I can know that you're coming. By entering the promo code special friend, no space, all lowercase, special friend, make sure friend is spelled F-R-I-E-N-D, you get the whole thing for $297, meals included. Now, if you need a place to stay in the East Bay where this will be, it's going to be in Tracy at a mini mansion. And if you need a place to stay, also let me know. We have limited places to stay inside the private home where it's happening, and then some places to stay outside that as well. So if you wish to stay, we are going to make it as cheap as possible for you to stay in the house. And then with Airbnb locations or hotel rooms that are nearby in addition. So there you have it. Here is where you go to register. And Gifford is probably already put that into the chat window. And I can't see the chat window right now, but I'm going to just assume that he's already put it in. It's theschoolforwizards.com/magic101, the numbers, magic101 -NOV for November 2016. And if you want the really super short version of it, go to tinyurl/SFW-magic. tinyurl/SFW-magic. And now, so I do that within 48 hours to take advantage of this. I'm now going to go back to the piece that I promised to go back to, which is that our imagination sets us apart. Because here's the thing, and if this attracts you, if you feel like you want to come and learn more from me, I would love to have you there. I would love it. So I just wanted to say that before we race back to this other part. So our imagination sets us apart from all other creatures. Because guess what? I can create a pink elephant inside of you by just saying pink elephant. And in order for you to parse pink elephant, you have to actually create a pink elephant in your mind. Most of us do that by making a picture of a pink elephant. Some of us do that by hearing the lumbering sound and the roar of a pink elephant. Some of us do that by imagining what a pink elephant's skin would feel like. Now, we do this through language, right? Our imagination and our language both set us apart. So here we have the big city that I had escaped to when I was a teenager. All of this, you know, all of the light from the vehicles, all the buildings, this is a landscape, and there are a few trees that I can see here, but most of this landscape was thought up and created by human beings. And those buildings didn't just build themselves. Someone thought, oh, I'm going to build a building. And then, oh, what kind of building am I going to build? And oh, let me make some plans for the building. And then, oh, let me hire a construction crew to create the building. Now, what I've just gone through are the building blocks of creation, which we are going to go over in The Power of Magic. But they are always the same, and people who are having a hard time manifesting or creating things are usually stuck in one of those places, and we'll talk about how to get unstuck from those places as well. But here's the way that the natural world is, right? It's a much more complex and yet less, you know, the same amount of planning had to go in here, but we weren't the ones that did it. Now, that might be controversial. I'm not going to enter into that zone right yet, but post to the chat or post comments to the video. Let me know what your thoughts about that. So our imagination sets us apart because of what we create. And this is why it is said that we are godlike. Because if you imagine that there is some being that might be thinking up the world, then guess what? We're like that too. We think up what we want to create. We must think of it first. If I want to write a book, I have to first have an inspiration to write a book. Then I have to decide what kind of book I'm going to write. Then I have to plan writing the book by making outlines, and then I have to actually sit down and write every word that goes into that book and publish it and do all of the tasks that require that book to actually take shape and form in the world. Other creatures are not like that. They are more being lived by the world. And we are the ones who are creators. So that is the fourth tip I wanted to give you. There are going to be 3 more next week. Stay tuned. I have really appreciated having you on the call. We are only a few minutes over, and I'm really super happy to have been here and been able to share this information with you. Be well. Have a fantastic week. And I did promise I would actually talk about the runoff, as in detritus that's runoff from the election. So here's the truth of that. Whether your candidate won or not, all the power that ever was or will be is here now. It's available to you now. It is just as available to you now as before the election. So your power is neither increased by the result of the election nor decreased by the result of the election, because most people don't engage power because they go to the past and they imagine the future. But power, and all the power that exists in the world, is only available in the present moment, and only available by you in the present moment, by each of us in the present moment. So for some of you, celebrate and get down to the work of being yourselves. For others of you, if you're grieving, then don't try to ignore it or walk around it. Allow yourself to fully feel what you're feeling, and I suggest that you do that with others, and that you focus on getting back to love and getting back to your own personal power, because the world needs your power. It needs you to engage. It needs us all to engage as individuals that are part of a larger society. So we're a part of our neighborhood. We're a part of our city. We're a part of our state, and we're a part of our country, and we're a part of our continent, and we're a part of our world. Like we are within all those things, and it behooves us to do whatever grieving that we need to do in order to get back to a place of presence. And here's a big secret about grieving, right? If your candidate lost and you wanted them to win, it may seem like the energy that you had was gone, or something important was gone. Like when a person dies, we imagine that they're gone. But what happens miraculously through the process of grieving is that that person comes back to us. Poof, they come back. This happened to me for both of my parents. I remember the moment that they came back. It was like, oh, hi, welcome back. Wow. You were gone for a little bit, but now you're back. And their physical selves are still gone. But I no longer grieve because their presence is with me. Their presence is with me. And so, and therefore, my power is with me, right? The resources that they had and that they taught me have returned from wherever they were vacationing while I was grieving back into me. And with that, I will let you go. I love you. Have a fantastic evening or morning, wherever it is, whatever time it is, where you are, and all is well. Talk to you soon. And bye for now.